folks in the room, we normally have a little mood music before the council meeting, so this has been ungodly quiet and a little awkward. I was about to start singing. We are going to call our meeting to order, so I just wanted to say hello in the absence of the classical refrains. All right. The St. Paul City Council is called to order. Roll call.
Jalali.
Here.
Naker.
Here.
Prince.
Here.
Tao. Tolbert. Yang. Council President Brenmon.
Here.
4 present, 3 absent, being council members Tao, Tolbert, and Yang, and council members Tao and Yang are excused.
Please stand and join us for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Consent agenda items 2 through 16 are before you for your consideration.
All right, so we're looking at consent. I understand we were going to be taking item 16 off for a 1-week layover. 1 week?
That'll be.
All right, so we're looking at taking 16 separately. So before we go to that, we will ask if there's anything else on consent that should be taken separate today. All right, seeing none, Ms. Jalali moves the balance of the consent agenda. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion prevails.
4 in favor, no one opposed. The consent agenda is adopted as amended. Item 16 is Resolution 22-1106, amending Chapter A1 of the appendixes to the Administrative Code establishing the Council Rules of Procedure.
All right, and again, this is a request for a 1-week layover from Councilmember Prince. Any discussion on that motion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion prevails.
5 in favor, no one opposed. The resolution is laid over to July 27th. Item 17 is Resolution 22-1020, authorizing the city to transfer $10 million of American Rescue Plan funds to specific accounts for neighborhood safety investments.
You heard it right, $10 million. This is exciting news. So we have a staff report from Laura Loxton on this American Rescue Plan Fund transfer. And we will hear each of these transfers separately today. I know that there are staff. I see Ms. Becker, Ms. Pinkert, Ms. Prosser in the crowd if we have questions in particular from staff, in addition to anything that we can throw at Laura. So let's start with this today. These are American Rescue Plan funds that were negotiated with the City Council and the Administration and Mayor's Office, and we are very pleased with these allocations. So let's hear it.
Great. Thank you, Council President and Council members. I'm Laura Logston. I'm a Program Administrator in the Office of Financial Services. I'll do just a really brief, quick overview of the 3 budget amendments on your agenda today, and then as the Council President said, I'll just take them one at a time after that. I am sharing slides, I think. There they are. Perfect. So just to summarize, the 3 budget amendments on your agenda allocate $25.6 million total in ARP funding. The first is $10 million for neighborhood safety investments. The second is $15.3 million for workforce investments. And then the third is $340,000 for business license fee reductions. With these investments, the city will have budgeted $118 million of our total $166.6 million in ARP funding, which is 71% of our total allocation. We plan to budget the remaining $48 million this year, following the funding plan agreed upon between the council and mayor, and plan to have the next set of projects reviewed and ready for budget amendments in September. So a Resolution 22-1020 budgets $10 million of ARP funding for neighborhood safety investments. These include $4 million for the Office of Neighborhood Safety Community Council grants, $1.5 million for investments in library optimal response, $1.5 million to expand parks recreation services, $1 million for traffic and pedestrian safety measures, and then $2 million to match a federal Department of Justice grant for the COPS program. So these investments support really an array of efforts aimed at creating safer outcomes in neighborhoods in St. Paul. I'll provide a little more detail about each of those. The $4 million for the Office of Neighborhood Safety will fund a grant program and grant process overseen by the Community Council focused on prevention of gun violence, youth violence, and group violence. The $1.5 million for Library Optimal Response supports a community-first approach to safety in libraries in ways that further embed a community care and trauma-sensitive approach to supporting youth and adult library users. The funding supports an external review and assessment of existing library public services safety resources, the creation of a comprehensive public services safety plan, and the creation and pilot implementation of a new staff role of safety specialists. The $1.5 million for Parks Recreation Expansion supports several different investments that expand services as well as address equipment needs. It funds added Saturday hours at 5 different rec centers, eliminates fees for athletic programs for ages 10 and up for the next 3 years, increases the Rec Tech lab presence at 10 different rec centers, and invests in a new climbing wall for the Recreation in Motion program, as well as new vehicles for the Summer Swarm Technology program and mobile recreation services. The $1 million for traffic and pedestrian safety supports a transportation safety action plan initiative that Public Works plans to have completed in the next 12 months. This includes a citywide safety crash evaluation, determining priority corridors and locations for investment, identifying key strategies to address traffic and pedestrian safety, and public engagement on these issues. The funds also are planned for an investment in temporary safety treatments at select locations on arterial and collector roadways. And finally, there's a $2 million match for the Federal Department of Justice Community-Oriented Policing Services grant to the police department. The ARP funds are the required local match for the $3.75 million provided through the DOJ grant, which the city previously accepted in March in Resolution 22-82. And with that, I'm happy to take any questions on this amendment.
Great. Are there questions or comments? Ms. Prince?
On the COPS grant match, is the $2 million the only match, or do we have to come up with an additional $2 million next year?
Council President and Councilmember Prince, my understanding is the $2 million is the full match that is required of the city.
Great, thank you.
Other questions? This, I guess I would just say that I'm going to be voting in support of this. $10 million is a lot of money, but when we're talking about neighborhood safety, it's I feel like we've done a good job of stretching $10 million over really a wide array of what we would define as public safety, from our expanded recs, help in our libraries, particularly the traffic safety. I would like to spend $0 and just remind everybody to slow down, calm down, and be safe for drivers. That's my $0 investment in that for folks here. We all need to be part of traffic safety, but and also the work of the Office of Neighborhood Safety and some of the grants that they will be putting out that will reduce the barriers to getting those grants to our community partners who are doing great work, and also the investment in group violence intervention, which I know that this council has been interested in seeing come to life. So there's a lot here that's very important to us, to our community members, and that it really crosses all of the, not all of, but many of the pieces of what is required to have a safer community for everyone. So I'll be supporting it. Any other discussion? Ms. Prince?
I would like to second that, Council President Brenmone. I think these priorities definitely reflect the work that the council's been doing since we first started talking about community first public safety for the late in 2019 and the 2020 budget. I'm especially pleased after hearing about the library's initiatives at our June 1st library board meeting to see this coming forward and the scope of safety approaches that we're going to be using. It's so critically important that that our library staff and the public feel safe in our libraries. And I think we're really learning a lot on alternative responses, initially through the COAST program, but more recently through the HEART team and DSI and the CARE team and the fire department on the different ways that we can respond to emergencies as they arrive in our public facilities. So, and particularly libraries. So I think this is a great package, and we can feel really good about coming together on this. The other thing I did want to mention, the $4 million for community grants is really a significant amount. That's another thing that we've been talking about since 2019, and I look forward to seeing how that program is going to be structured and when our groups can start applying. So I will also be voting for this.
Any other comments? All right, seeing none, I'll take that as a motion from Ms. Prince. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion prevails.
5 in favor, no one opposed. The resolution is adopted. Item 18 is Resolution 22-1021, authorizing the city to transfer $15,300,000 of American Rescue Plan funds to specific accounts for workforce support investments.
Ms. Loxton.
Thank you, Council President. So this resolution budgets $15.3 million for investments in workforce supports. It is combined with Ramsey County's investment of $9.5 million of their ARP funds for a total investment of $24.8 million. The city's $15.3 million of ARP funding, of that $15.3 million, $11.8 million will be transferred to the county to operate key programs, and the remaining funding will stay with the city to manage certain programs. So there are 8 different programs that are planned to be funded with the city's portions of these funds, and also county funds are supporting these programs as well. At a high level, those programs include a youth employment affiliate model that provides systems alignment to create connections for schools, to share resources and alignment with the county, for industry events and job fairs. That also creates a pilot work barrier removal fund to provide small stipends for COVID-impacted students to pay for work-related items that they need when they start jobs, including things like uniforms and transportation. Second, there's a driver's license academy that supports youth and young adults in receiving their driver's licenses, paying for driver's education and training stipends for participants, as well as wraparound services and mentorship. There is a pilot of the Learn, Earn, and Achieve Potential program, or LEAP, sites in Ramsey County, which provide coordinated employment supports, engage youth voice, and financial literacy. There's a no barrier employment program where the county and the city will be implementing employment models to support those experiencing homelessness with low to no barrier, meaningful work experiences, wages, and connections to the workforce ecosystem. There's an expansion of the Right Track program here at the city. This involves kind of several key aspects, such as in-person and virtual hubs for youth employment and training, year-round training for youth employers and supervisors, doubling the youth internship placements of the program, a school credit recovery program for those participating in internships, as well as career pathways for those 18 to 24 years old. There's an investment in a creative media and tech pathways program that engages young adults in designing and promoting content for an online youth employment hub. Earn and Learn models is kind of the biggest investment for the city. That's where $11.2 million of our ARP funding is going. That includes Earn and Learn opportunities for those who are COVID impacted, ages 18 to 35. The learning involves things like on-the-job training, short-term credential training programs, and internships. And earning involves things like subsidized wages, stipends for the learning, and paid internships. And then finally, there's an employer engagement outreach program where the city will partner with area chambers and economic development intermediaries to interface with workforce and with the workforce investments to ensure that training and job seekers are aligned. And with that, I'm happy to take any questions on this amendment.
Great. Are there questions? Ms. Naker.
Thanks, Council President. No questions, but just a comment in support of this item and the previous item. I was trying to decide where to comment and decided on this one. But I'm really pleased to see and proud of the agreement that our council worked out with the administration to make sure that we're spending so many of our American Rescue Plan dollars responding to really the most basic needs of our city, what we hear from our constituents all the time, public safety and a healthy economy where everyone can thrive, and especially where our young people can be supported to getting into jobs. And I appreciate the fact that this investment in particular focuses on removing barriers for young people. I just want to say to all of our staff who are in the room, and this is something I know we've talked about offline too, but American Rescue Plan dollars are one-time dollars. And one of the things that our council has talked about is the need to make sure that these investments have tails in effects, but not tails in costs, right? We want to make sure that whatever we're doing has a longer lasting effect than just the amount of time that we have the dollars to spend. And so whether it's a pilot that can show data that allows us to justify spending more in the future, or whether it's something that this one-time investment is really the lever that catalyzes future growth, I just really encourage our leaders of these programs to be thinking about how to make these dollars go as far as they can.
Mr. Tolbert?
Yeah, I just want to say, I think a lot of these are really good investments. I know folks are here. Maybe we could highlight them and explain a little bit more what they are. I know we have some Right Track folks here that, or parks directors or workforce directors, that they're exciting programs. We should talk about them a little bit more than maybe a bullet point.
That is an invitation. Yeah, there we go. All right, we see the Parks Director Rodriguez stepping up to take that invitation and run with it. Oh, yes.
Yeah.
All right.
We have a county and city representative, Erica Prosser, our deputy director as well. Council President, council members, thank you. Specific to the rec investment, the 1.5 million, it's a huge deal for us and our workforce, and specifically the rec centers, to be able to expand hours, but not only from within the four walls and the programs that we do. It allows us to also go out into neighborhoods and increase our mobile capacity. So when you talk about a climbing wall or building out that game truck, which we're currently renting now through a private vendor, that allows us to really increase our capacity and increase where we program throughout the city and reach kids in different ways that we haven't been able to do in the past. We can't just rely on them to show up at the rec center anymore. We have to go to them and figure out ways to be creative and innovative in that way, and these ARP funds will let us do that in the coming years. Also just want to highlight the free sports initiative within that as well, and we've been able to pilot that out with our fall registration that took place last month, and already seeing soccer teams and flag football teams at rec centers where we normally wouldn't see them. I think Jimmy Lee Rec Center has about 5 soccer teams. I can't remember a time in my career where Jimmy Lee has had 5 soccer teams. So we're super excited about that work and our ability to enhance our operation and serve young people throughout the city. I'll let you all.
Thank you, Council President, council members. It's been several months since Ling and I made the rounds with council members to talk about our proposed joint workforce strategy, leveraging our ARP dollars. So it's good to be at this point and ready to move forward and change people's lives, really. I'm going to talk about the Right Track specific programs, and then I'll hand it over to Director Becker. You know, we do Right Track really well, and so part of this money is just doing more of what we're already doing, serving more young people, but it is going to allow us to target opportunity youth in ways that we don't have just the staff capacity to do right now. This will allow us to dig in on quality programming, building up our curriculum, looking at other evidence-based models, programs that we have run, or other youth workforce development programs, to build those into the Right Track programming model, and to be able to support youth wages for those additional training hours. To your point, Councilmember Naker, this money is going to go away, and one of the things that I'm excited about all of it, but one of the things I'm really excited about is the work that we're going to be doing on employer engagement. And there's a number of aspects of that, but in order to sustain the growth of this program beyond the ARP dollars, we need more employers. And so we're going to be using all kinds of we'll have more boots on the ground, more partners in the recruitment game, and we haven't quite figured out all of the details of this yet, but it might look something like we recruit a new employer. We ask them to take 2 young people. It's best practice to have 2 young people in a workplace so they're not alone. And maybe we pay the wages the first year, and the second year we pay the wages for just one of the interns, and the third year we phase out. But those are some of the incentives and ways that we want to look at how we can expand the program beyond the ARP dollars. The other thing that we're looking at doing is creating a youth-friendly credential. So even if an employer wasn't participating in our, what we all know as the Right Track, our general Right Track model, employers could send their supervisors and managers to our curriculum program and learn about how to make their workplace youth-friendly and more inclusive. And if we think they met the standards that we've set, we'll give them a stamp of approval as a youth-friendly employer. So it allows our community to participate in different ways than we are right now. I'm going to turn it over to Lane. There is some money that the city is keeping as well for the learn and earn models. This has been something I know that Councilmember Tolbert has talked about for a long time on the WIB. And most of those programs will be run through Ramsey County, but the city, we have some interest in how our workforce our city workforce can benefit from programs like that, whether it's in the lead pipe work or a separate pot of funding, but the Emerald Ash Borer funding, or other programs like the EMS Academy is one I think that many people are familiar with. So we'll be working with departments to help departments who have ideas get those on paper and creating pathways for our own workforce. And I will hand it over to Director Becker.
Ms. Prosser, before you step away, Mr. Tolbert had a hand up.
Oh, sorry.
Could you just, on a high level, I think this is a good time to highlight it a little bit, talk about how expansive Right Track is now in terms of the different types of jobs that we have. I think, much of us remember it as YJ1, YJ2, but this is a big growth, and Right Track continues to be very innovative and expansive, which is great.
Yeah.
I just think it's a good reminder to let people know.
Sure. We have interns that are working at Tree Trust this summer. We have interns that are working at Wells Fargo. We have we have a Right Track intern that is working with Parks and Recreation on our systems plan, so engagement within the community. We met yesterday with a young woman who has worked several summer jobs with Right Track and now she's working for Ramsey County. We have opportunities for young people in different STEM opportunities, the UX Academy, User Experience Academy. Young people that graduate with that user experience certification have very good opportunities right away upon graduation. But we really have a vast number of opportunities for young people. the one, and maybe Ling will get into this, but the one thing that we consistently hear back from young people is they want more opportunities to learn about entrepreneurship. And so we don't do that now, and I don't know what that looks like. But that is something that our young people have been asking for and will be part of the ARP investment.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Hey, good afternoon, Councilmember President, council members. It is great to be with you guys. I feel like we've been on this journey for a long time to get to this day. First of all, I want to, on behalf of Ramsey County, just thank you for the partnership and the trust that you have in the work that we can do collectively. I know it's gotten national attention. Erica and I get calls. Very few communities are being strategic about their money like this, and I think that is something that we can be really proud of. It's difficult sometimes to navigate the different layers of government and that trust piece, but I think it really says a lot about the potential of what we can do with these dollars to ensure that we're really, leveraging each other's money in a way, and our skill sets and our programs in a way that is, really beneficial for our community. So kudos to all of you and to our county board for making that investment, hopefully. There's so many other programs we could talk about, but I just want to start with my background's economic development, and people are a big part of that economic development strategy. I think you guys know that. You've always been focused on investing in your people. Sometimes it's difficult to have those dollars to invest in people, and this is a one-time opportunity to really think about that and also think about how that could be sustainable. If we're not investing in people on the front end, the county ends up spending money on them in lots of other ways, as you all know. So there is an opportunity for shifting of priorities and dollars as we think about the future. We think about land, building, capital. We do a lot of things to get buildings ready, gas stations ready, land ready. Now we're going to get our people ready. And I think this is really the investment that this community needs. I'm going to start with that largest investment of that Learn and Earn and why it's so critical. That is that first investment. There are jobs out in the community right now for young people, particularly those that are, 18 and up and can work, and, maybe some of them needed some sort of high school degree, some do not. But those aren't the jobs of the future. Those are not the jobs that are going to propel this economy. And while some people need to do some of those because they need money, other people can do that and also do something else. And potentially our goal of being strategic about what we offer for them to do and what they're exposed to do is a real opportunity for this community. I would say Ramsey County, St. Paul, and Right Track is another part of this strategy. We have a very robust workforce ecosystem that is generally helping kids explore careers and get work ready. What we don't have is a stronger investment around really helping people with credentialed training as they get out of high school, who kind of go through the cracks per se. And I would say those people have increased significantly. You imagine the kids that are 16, 17 that experience extreme school disruption during the pandemic. They are now our 18, 19, and 20-year-olds in our community. And that's why, we are using data-informed investments, both in who we're going to serve and what we're going to be spending money in. It's really targeted toward the 18 and up sort of opportunity in terms of workforce, in terms of the investment here. One of the biggest investment, as I mentioned, is this Learn and Earn model, where people will be getting training stipends for making investments into their future. But this is also data informed, and we are focusing on gateway occupations. So our RFP that we're going to release collectively will ask community providers to really bring forth partnerships with employers around all the high growth gateway occupations. And you might ask, what are those? Well, the criteria are they have to pay an average wage of at least $42,000. They have to have minimal negative impact of employment during the pandemic. They have to have strong current demand. We know what those jobs are. They have to have strong forecasted demand. They focus on middle skills that are high wage and high demand, and they generally will not require a four-year degree. So they're associate degree jobs or less. And this is the future of our community, because there's other times in your career that you can make more educational investments. We don't need to burden a whole population with a four-year debt in order to just get started working and being, contributing their talents and assets to our community and to our businesses. And businesses are saying that now too, more and more. So while we're doing that, we also have to reduce barriers. As Councilmember Naker was saying, that is a really big part of it. And so one of the other projects is that driver's license. I would say that is by far the biggest issue we've heard from young people. And as people come talk to me today about types of jobs, I would say a driver's license is the biggest work credential, most important one you can have today. It's more important than even a high school diploma in some cases. 47% of new job postings since May of last year in Ramsey County require a driver's license. It's in all industries. And so by us trying to help young people get those licenses, we are actually opening those doors for them to have jobs. And a lot of times, you know, jobs in our public works or our parks, they require driver's licenses, but you don't actually need a car to have those jobs. We provide you the vehicle, but it's still a barrier to getting some of those good, you know, county or municipal jobs. So we're excited to launch that. It's going to have multiple different pillars of like opportunity for young people, but we've already had people want to sign up to get tutoring support, to get licenses, to navigate kind of the system, and we've been meeting with Department of Public Safety too to see if we can even get additional barriers removed for people in the program. So, so that's a one that I wanted to highlight. I'm trying to think of what else you might be interested in. Certainly working with our school districts is a really great opportunity. Right Track does a great job with that. Today we were just talking to some other schools about, you know, what would it look like for us to invest in our Learn and Earn program around some of the young people who didn't graduate because they're just a few credits short. What could we sort of invest in there at that moment to get them that last, you know, little bit? And so there is an opportunity there. We're trying to get those numbers of how many kids are we're still connected to that have that. So that would be another highlight. You know, I'm happy to answer any questions if you have any. I think Erica's right on. The employer partnership is a huge one, and the county's already made an initial investment that I hope you guys can build on. We launched a new program called Inclusive Employer Champions, where we have 8 chambers within the Ramsey County that now will be our trusted messenger out to the business community. They've agreed in a contracted relationship to basically put our information into their newsletters, their websites, their events, and also allow, you know, obviously we're a duo here, so Right Track will get all that as well. So that's the nice thing. We're not going to duplicate. Everything that we are doing in terms of workforce strategy is available to the city to advance its Right Track and other priorities as well. So happy to take any other questions, but thank you again. I can't thank you enough for your consideration of such a large investment in the people of St. Paul.
And thanks, Councilmember Tolbert, for the prompt to get folks to come up and share on these. Like, we've been briefed, you've been brought along for the ride, but I think any opportunity to reiterate the things that are happening and the new tweaks that are emerging. I love what you just said about finding those students that almost graduated. And I mean, what a terrible loss to have invested, 4 years in high school and miss out on graduation by one class. And how that can change your entire life, and how simple it would be to actually resolve that is just so innovative. And there's probably a time not so long ago that I would have cringed at the notion of passing this much money to Ramsey County. But with your leadership, Director Becker, and your clear vision and your strong ability to partner authentically with the city, I feel great about it, and I'm just so excited at where we're headed with this. So thank you for the extended report.
Yeah.
Look to my colleagues. Mr. Tolbert.
Yeah, I just want to thank Parks Director Rodriguez, I think Deputy Director Prosser, and Director Becker for all this great work. It really is important stuff, and it's, in my opinion, going directly at the current challenges that we face in our economy right now. You know, the most common thing we hear from employers is we don't have trained workers, we need trained workers, and this is helping do that. And I think that kind of the catch-22 that we often have had, and this is why the Earn and Learn, I think, makes so much sense, is, you know, once a person has bills or, you know, family obligations or whatever it might be, it's hard to say, can you take off work and not have any income come in so that you can earn more? And it's like, well, I wish I could, but I have a monthly bill due, or I have, child support, or whatever it might be, or I have kids to take care of, to feed. And this will help hopefully bridge that, because that's not a fair kind of catch-22 that we require of folks to do. And quite frankly, if people take advantage of this, it allows for upward economic mobility, and that just helps everybody. It helps their family, it helps them, it changes the trajectory of their life. And I think this is going to be one of those things where it's like, we're really helping improve people's lives and also meeting the business needs in our own economy. And so it's really both of those things. And it's interesting because in the past week, I've just had random encounters with people who are like, oh yeah, my son is 18 or my son is this, and I'm not sure what they're going to do next year. And I'm like, have them go to Workforce Solutions right now. There will never be this much. I mean, hopefully we'll continue this after ARP, but with this one-time investment, there is more money and more resources available for young people to improve themselves, not having to go to college, but maybe get an accreditation or a CDL license, a driver's license, whatever it might be. Now is the time. And so I don't know if you want to market towards parents who have 17 to 19-year-olds at home or whatever. But it really is a good time for people to find their career and find those living wage jobs. So thank you for both of you on your innovation. I do think it will change lives.
If I can make one more comment on the economic development side, because I know we focus a lot on the job seekers. I think another reason why this investment is so important is we are seeing a great number of job postings going fully remote, or businesses that are saying they want to recruit like in an 8 or 9 state area. They're coming to me saying, I was going to do this with you, but now we're thinking about. And so the urgency to invest in our people is really significant when it comes to the work you do around your economic development of wanting to have businesses invest in their own communities and keep the footprint that they do of business, and also to ensure that we have those vibrant communities, because no one actually wants to live in a community where most of the workers are remote and all the talent is being recruited from other areas. So this is a really important connection into why workforce and economic development are so intricately connected and critical. So I see Director Goodman, we all work together very closely, and I just really appreciate all your staff and look forward to hopefully soon. I think we need to execute a JPA as well in order to transfer those funds. So you should see one more item come before you very soon. So thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right, I'll take that motion from Mr. Tolbert. Any final discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion prevails.
5 in favor, no one opposed. The resolution is adopted. Item 19 is Resolution 22-1025, authorizing the city to transfer $340,299 of American Rescue Plan funds to a specific account for DSI licensed services.
Ms. Loxton.
Thank you, Council President. So this resolution budgets about $340,000 for costs associated with the 25% reduction in business license fees. In January of this year, there was an executive order that required proof of vaccination or a negative test result to enter city licensed businesses who sell or serve food and or beverages on the premises. In order to assist with any financial impacts of that order and of the pandemic, another executive order was passed that reduced license fees for those businesses by 25%. So these ARP funds help cover the costs associated with that reduction in revenue. And happy to take any questions on that.
Great. Are there questions? All right, seeing none, Ms. Naker moves approval. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion prevails.
5 in favor, no one opposed. The resolution is adopted. Item 20 is Resolution 22-1079, ordering a special election to be held on November 8th, 2022, to add a ballot question on whether the city should create a dedicated fund for subsidies for children's early care and education through a property tax levy.
Ms. Naker.
Thanks, Council President. I'd like to move a 1-week layover of this item.
There's a motion for a 1-week layover from Ms. Naker. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion prevails.
5 in favor, no one opposed. The resolution is laid over to July 27th. Item 21 is first reading of ordinance 22-32, granting the application of Mark A. Arth and Belfry Building LLC to rezone property at 311-319 Ramsey Street from RT2 Townhouse Residential to T1 Traditional Neighborhood, and to rezone the property at 391-411 Pleasant Avenue from RM2 Multiple Family Residential to T1 Traditional Neighborhood, and amending Chapter 60 of the Legislative Code pertaining to the zoning map.
All right, this is the first reading of this ordinance, and we are seeking a staff report on this item. Yay. Welcome.
Thank you, Council President, council members. I'm Katie Dadles, planner with the city's Department of Planning and Economic Development. I can give you a brief presentation on the rezoning today if you would like. I didn't prepare anything for online, but I can. Is this overhead working?
Yep.
It is. Okay,
Yep,
good.
It's sort of operated verbally.
I'm sorry?
You have to say, I'm putting something on the.
Putting
overhead.
something on the overhead.
And then it works.
Okay, yeah. So, you know, this is a rezoning from residential to traditional neighborhood. And generally speaking, I'll put it on the overhead, and there we go. Okay, good. The property to be rezoned is in this area. My apologies, it's in black and white. The idea here is that it's currently zoned, some of it RM2 and some of it zoned RT2, which is it is up in here. And let me show you a picture of the properties to be rezoned. That may help just a little bit here. Property on the left here is a sort of a Queen Anne style house. And then the property on the right is a former church. The former church property has been used for commercial purposes for many years as a non-conforming use. And the property on the left, the house, is one that is also wanting to be rezoned. The intent here on that property owner is to sell it and to have the new owner operate a law office from the property. And so this gives us an opportunity to sort of clean up the zoning, maybe if we could say, and change the church, which is currently residentially zoned, to make it a conforming use, and then to allow for the conversion of the house to an office use, which is consistent with the T1. And you can see across the street into the south is some T1 zoning, and just immediately to the south, this is it's Ramsey Street and then turns into Grand Avenue as it goes over the interstate. And there's a small professional building with multiple tenants in there. And so the district council recommended approval of it. There was no testimony in support or opposition at the public hearing. Planning Commission and the staff recommended approval. And so the recommendation before you is for approval on the public hearing following next week.
Thank you. Ms. Naker.
Thanks, Council President. And Ms. Dadles, I want to publicly apologize to you because I am just realizing that you had emailed me weeks ago to ask if I wanted a staff report on this item. I said I did not, and then when I was asked today, I forgot that I had told you that, and you just did a beautiful job without any preparation whatsoever. So I am so sorry about that. I take full responsibility. Thank you for the information.
Thank you.
Thanks. And so this item will lay over for 1 week to public hearing.
Item 22 is first reading of ordinance 22-33, amending chapters 62 and 65 of the Legislative Code pertaining to consent petition requirements for some non-conforming use permits and some conditional use permits.
And on this item, I know council members have been briefed, but we just asked for a very brief summary of what we're doing as the first reading of this ordinance.
Okay. Well, I have a few slides I can go through quickly with council members. If folks in the control can pull up the presentation inside the council room, that would be good. I'll just start without any slides, but basically we have a zoning study underway to consider amending the consent petition requirement in our zoning code. And that comes from our comp plan, which says that we ought to review the language in our code that can result in unnecessary hurdles, and then to propose some amendments to the zoning code. Petitions are a prerequisite for some applications for zoning, and the typical requirement is, I guess not on the screen, but there you go. It reads, a notarized petition of at least 2/3 of the owners of the described parcels of real estate within 100 feet of the subject property has been submitted stating their support for the use. So this is the language that we're looking at changing in the ordinance. The applications, the zoning applications that require a petition are to establish, to reestablish, expand or relocate non-conforming uses, and there are 2 conditional use permits that require petitions as well, one for carriage house use and one for reuse of large structure. I would point out that a change of non-conforming use is one that does not require a petition. And I also want to make sure that council members understand that petition requirements for rezoning property are not being affected by this ordinance. The petition requirement entered into the zoning code sometime between 1975 and 1986, but we weren't able to determine exactly when. But the thought was that non-conforming use permits allow uses that aren't otherwise permitted in that zoning district, and because rezoning is something that would achieve that, and rezoning did require consent petitions, that the thought was, well, let's require a consent petition for non-conforming use permits as well, and a couple of those conditional use permits. And by doing so, that gives some property owners some control over nearby land use decisions. It was raised that there was difficulty obtaining valid petitions, discussed back in 2012, so 10 years ago, when our non-conforming use chapter was last updated. The Planning Commission considered removing the petition requirement at that time for many of the reasons that are raised today, but at that time there was some concern about the loss of control of property owners, and in the end that petition requirement was not updated. I'll also point out to you that the consent petition requirement has been waived, or had been waived, for about 2 years during the pandemic, and that requirement just came back into being enforced in middle of March of this year. Some concerns that applicants have that we've heard from them in terms of equity, time, and costs. There's some anecdotal information in the zoning study. A grocery store owner that wanted to open up and couldn't get a grocery store owner across the street to sign because concerned about competition. There was a fire station that wanted to be reused for a restaurant and coffee shop. It took them a very long time to get the required number of signatures, so that affected the timeline for that project. Condominiums can significantly increase the number of signatures required on a petition, making it just that much more difficult. Sometimes applicants have reported being asked to be paid to sign a petition, so there's some self-interest there. And I would point out that there are a few instances where the Planning Commission has granted variances of the requirement, but the variance bar is pretty high, and those are relatively rare occurrences. So the reason for difficulty in getting signatures on a petition: non-responsive property owners who just don't live, they live out of town, they live out of state, or it's a financial institution. Owners just don't answer doors or respond to letters. Again, condominiums increase the number, and their secured entrances can make it hard to get in and knock on doors and ask for signatures. Sometimes the language barrier can be a difficulty. Concerns about competition from a new business, as I alluded to. Racist motivations, there's some information in the staff report about that. And then determining who's eligible to sign a petition sometimes can be hard when you've got a corporation or a trust or an estate that's listed in the tax records. And reasons that the Planning Commission considered, well, why maybe we shouldn't amend this requirement, and reasons not to amend it would be to allow for that property owner can retain some control over nearby land use decisions, and not to amend it, then the property owner isn't not forced to go out and sell their proposal. They can just come in and apply. And then neighbors may feel compelled to have to oppose something if there's no petition requirement. In terms of public hearing testimony, at the Planning Commission, we had 2 people speak. And what we heard was that they felt that the current regulations favor owners over renters, that the regulations give veto rights to a small number of property owners, amendments remove an unnecessary hurdle to small-scale housing, and permits requests still need to go through the Planning Commission and to meet the findings that are in the zoning code. And in terms of written testimony, we heard from 2 district councils, a community organization, and 3 individuals, and I think they largely expressed similar things: equity considerations, not stifling that small-scale housing or gentle density that could be happening with this, not allowing the concerns of a few to outweigh really the interests of the city overall, and again, the Planning Commission's role in this of still holding public hearings, sending out public hearing notices, and needing to meet the findings in the zoning code. So the proposed amendment eliminates the consent petition requirement for some non-conforming use permits and those 2 conditional use permits that I talked about. So that's all that I have, and I'd be happy to answer questions if you have them.
Are there questions? Ms. Prince?
Just a comment. I wanted to thank Ms. Dadlas for the really good work on this. I think you made an excellent, the presentation is really important about the way this moves us forward with our zoning code and in our intentions. And it really doesn't change things significantly, other than the problems that we were having with those petitions. So thank you.
feel like I was part of those conversations in 2012, like fresh on the council and running into issues with development because of out-of-state and out-of-country property owners who, you know, you had to send a international certified letter to and hope it'd come back. That was a barrier. So I'm very supportive, and I'll be looking forward to voting on this, and I truly appreciate the presentation. Ms. Naker.
Thanks, Council President. I agree with you and Councilmember Prince. Thanks so much for the very informative presentation and all the hard work. I think we need to be removing barriers to development and welcoming new people into our community as much as possible. And I also just want to commend you and the team for, this is a concrete example of using what we learned during the pandemic, namely the waivers on the petition requirements that you mentioned, and doing a test to see what happened. And as it turned out, as you pointed out, we didn't have a huge impact as a result of having that be removed. And so I think that that's a great use of evidence to show that we can actually move forward learning something from this pandemic. So thanks for taking the time to move that forward.
All right, and this will lay over to public hearing next week.
Item 23 is first reading of ordinance 22-34, amending section 410.04 of the legislative code to align with recent changes in Minnesota statute following the passage of the legislative omnibus bill that allows for extended hours during the World Cup.
And Director Najelic is here to give us a brief staff report. We assured him there was no controversy, but more just wanted to make sure we weren't confused about what was coming before us. Given All-Star Game is upon us, and then World Cup was in the title, and lots of things to be confused about. So set us straight, please.
Council President, council members, thank you for allowing me to present this afternoon. And when the council president, through Jessica, said that it was a fun presentation, I said I'm all for it. But more exciting, as Director Rodriguez said the word, soccer. As we know, in August, soccer is taking center stage in the city of St. Paul with a Major League Soccer All-Star Game coming up on August 10th with some pre-events. But we also know that the appetite for St. Paul residents doesn't stop with one event. And we know that the World Cups are coming up, 2 of those, and there will be games throughout the world, not necessarily at our time zone. And through the state legislature is giving us authorization to allow some of our fabulous establishments with on-sale liquor licenses to be open during the live telecast games throughout the tournament. So there's a game somewhere and one of our fabulous establishments wants to be open, they can get a permit from the Department of Safety and Inspections. They can be open 30 minutes before the game, during the game, and 30 minutes after. So it goes beyond the normal hours of 10 a.m. to 2 a.m., given the fact that we are an international world. St. Paul loves soccer, and it's time to watch some soccer. So yeah, so before you is just taking the state statute language and putting it into ordinance such that we can start issuing permits for any of the World Cup games that are upcoming. With that, I will take questions, and thank you, Council President, for allowing me to have a fun presentation.
All right. Any questions? All right. Thank you very much for being here.
And this ordinance is also laid over to July 22nd for second reading public hearing. Item 24 is first reading of ordinance 22-35, amending sections 310.01 and 310.18 of the legislative code to add Class N small brewer off sale, 128 ounces license, and Class T temporary World Soccer Cup licenses and corresponding fees.
Any questions on this item? All right, very well.
And this ordinance is also laid over to July 27th for second reading public hearing. Item 25 is a public hearing for ordinance 22-21, granting the application of Jeffers Pond Development, LLC, to rezone the property at 150 Water Street West from IT Transitional Industrial to T3 Traditional Neighborhood, and amending Chapter 60 of the Legislative Code pertaining to the zoning map.
Ms. Moore reminded me that this is the fourth reading of this item, so we will have a public hearing and be able to approve as well. So this is a public hearing. Is there anyone here to speak to this item? Seeing none, Ms. Naker moves to close the public hearing and approve. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion prevails.
5 in favor, no one opposed. The public hearing is closed and the ordinance is adopted. Item 26 is Resolution Public Hearing 22-200, accepting and allocating a McKnight Foundation Climate and Energy Program grant extension and $50,000 of additional funds.
This is a public hearing. Is there anyone here to speak to this item? Seeing none, Ms. Jalali moves to close the public hearing and approve. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion prevails.
5 in favor, no one opposed. The public hearing is closed and the resolution is adopted. Item 27 is Resolution Public Hearing 22-191, approving the application of Agape Love Church for a sound level variance in order to present live amplified sound on July 30th at 995 University Avenue.
This is a public hearing. Is there anyone here to speak to this item? Come on up. Welcome.
Good afternoon. I was sitting over there the whole time thinking, am I going to be able to reach the microphone?
Oh, you're...
But I am. Thank you for your time, Council President, Council members. My name is Zhang. I'm the Secretary of Agape Love Church, and this is also Pastor Song Lee, who is present with me today. We are requesting the sound variance. It's our first time doing a live stage, a kind of community get-together. And so we are located right in kind of St. Paul University, Lexington area. And so we are... we're going to be using 4 speakers to amplify, so just 2 regular head speakers and 2 subwoofers. And so it's just kind of to have, get the community. We invited local neighbors and also local businesses just to come out and let us know that we are here. And so we are asking for that variance. We did get a letter with the 4 conditions. We had initially applied for the 95 decibels, but we are okay with the 85. It was also a request on there to also have a monitoring sound system to have it not go over that. And so we do have a sound level meter that will also be available to make sure we do not oversee that 85 decibels as well. And then I know that I think there was a public comment that was worried about the parking space. It doesn't directly relate to the sound variance, but we're very mindful of the neighbors as well too. So we do want to let the person who made the public know that we do have about 60 parking spaces, and we're also working with the school next to us for overflow parking. We'll also have individuals trying to kind of, watch for traffic and whatnot. The only change or amendment that I did want to let you guys know is that the previous application, we did have a area that was kind of set for that, but we have to move it westwards. I don't know if we can project that on the screen so you guys can see.
Sure. If you have a map,
Yes.
there's a right next to you, you might see like a square. If you set it down on that, there's a camera in the ceiling, believe it or not, and there you go. And it's
Okay. So when we had initially applied for the application, this was the area that we wanted to use, but our head building management had recommended that we move over west or this direction, just so that there is also an exit, just because there's other businesses and whatnot. So we would be primarily in this area, in this corner here, and the sound will be amplified going towards this direction, towards our building.
and that's included in the application?
Yes.
The changes? Okay, great.
Oh, which part?
The different, or the new location of the stage. I mean, it makes perfect sense to me. I was just,
On the new location, this was an amendment that we just made because we just found out yesterday, and so we wanted to present that
Okay.
today, just to, yeah.
okay. Ms. Naker, did you have a hand up? No. All right. So, thank you. Sounds like fun.
Thank you.
Anyone else here on this public hearing? I guess I'll look to the city attorney. Would we want to approve as amended with the new stage site?
Council President, Council, yes.
All right. And it sounds to me like a minor change that's going to help with acoustics and public safety and supporting the businesses, so I don't think it's particularly troublesome. But that's why I was asking, just to make sure that we got it right. So closing the public hearing and approving as amended by Ms. Jalali. Any discussion? Ms. Naker.
Thanks, Council President. I just want to thank you both. That was a really delightful presentation, and I appreciate the way that you highlighted the things that you're doing to make sure that the event will be an amenity to the neighborhood and taking into account people's concerns. We don't often see that kind of presentation for sound level variances, and it was just really a treat. So thank you, and I hope the event is great.
Any other discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion prevails.
5 in favor, no one opposed. The public hearing is closed and the resolution is adopted as amended. Item 28 is Resolution Public Hearing 22-192, approving the application of Awaken Community for a sound level variance in order to present amplified sound on August 7th at 2 Wabasha Street, Raspberry Island Regional Park.
This is a public hearing. Is there anyone here to speak to this item? Seeing none, Ms. Naker moves to close the public hearing and approve. All in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion prevails.
5 in favor, no one opposed. The public hearing is closed and the resolution is adopted. Item 29 is Resolution Public Hearing 22-193, approving adverse action against the auto repair garage license held by Dukes Cars and Towing, LLC, doing business as Dukes Cars and Towing for the premises located at 977 Front Avenue.
Mr. Ernest.
Good afternoon, Council President, Council members. Stephen Ernest on behalf of the Department of Safety and Inspections. Before you is a resolution approving adverse action against the auto repair garage shop license held by Duke's Cars and Towing and imposing a $2,000 fine as well as a 10-day license suspension. I'll just kind of briefly lay out the facts. They're pretty straightforward. On May 12th, the department conducted an inspection at the licensed premises based on a complaint. And during the course of that inspection, uncovered 2 license condition violations, both of which relate to storage of auto parts on the licensed premises as well as trash and other debris. Based on those findings, the department forwarded a request for action to the city attorney's office, and we issued the notice of violation to the license holder. Because this is their 3rd violation within 18 months, the department is requesting the presumptive penalty, which is a $2,000 fine and 10-day license suspension.
Great. Are there any questions? Okay, thank you very much for the staff report. This is a public hearing. Is there anyone here to speak to this item? As there's nobody here I won't belabor the point beyond saying that this is a very fair penalty. This 3 times in 18 months, and there's remaining concerns about how this property is disposing of oil and other hazardous waste. And so I will be voting in support of this and encourage Duke's Cars and Towing to get their act together, because I don't think I've seen a penalty like this come in on a garage in quite a while. So we know that there are issues and they need to be corrected. Any other discussion on this motion? All right, I move to close the public hearing and approve. All in favor say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? Motion prevails.
5 in favor, no one opposed. The public hearing is closed and the resolution is adopted. Item 30 is Resolution Public Hearing 22-194, approving the application of Forward Events, LLC, for a sound level variance in order to present amplified sound on August 6, 2022 at 390 Kellogg Boulevard, Union Depot, Parking Lot C.
This is a public hearing. Is there anyone here to speak to this item? Seeing none, Ms. Naker moves to close the public hearing and approve. All in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion prevails.
5 in favor, no one opposed. The public hearing is closed and the resolution is adopted. Legislative hearing consent agenda items 31 through 58 are before you for your consideration.
Good afternoon, Ms. Mormon.
Good afternoon, Council President Brenmo and council members. I have 5 items that will need to be read into the record. Items 31, 33, 42, 43, and 45.
Item 31 is RLHTA 22-215, ratifying the appealed special tax assessment for property at 564 Blair Avenue.
Ms. Mormon.
Council President, this is an assessment for removal of a vehicle from private property. A vehicle abatement order was issued on July 9th of 2021 for removing a GMC tan with no plates and a commercial trailer. The order was not appealed. The inspector was not contacted. The owner indicates that he probably misplaced for a little while. The order itself did reach out to the tenant or the person responsible for the vehicle. It's not clear if it was a tenant or somebody subleasing. That person evidently made a commitment to remove the vehicle, ended up in jail, didn't remove the vehicle. The city ended up removing the vehicle, and he believes he made a good faith effort to address the problem. The assessment in front of you is the cost of $340, a service charge of $162, with the total assessment of $502 for the removal. There is an additional piece of correspondence that you would have noticed was added to your record this morning on this property.
Great, thank you. Are there questions for Ms. Mormond?
If I may also, this is a landlord who we do have experience with, so the appeals process and the calling the inspector process is relevant because that would have been a known thing to undertake.
I see. Thank you very much. All right, this is a public hearing. Is there anyone here to speak to this item? Sir, before you get started, just welcome. Thank you for being here. Like you to try to summarize your thoughts to us in 2 minutes or less.
2 minutes or less.
Yes, if you could
Yes.
do that, please. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Council President and Council members. Thank you for giving me opportunity to speak with you. I had a vehicle abatement order for 2 vehicles, and then I was able to get the trailer out of the property. I want to pointing out that. And then the other one, somehow I could not get the vehicle out of it. But I would like to say that this incident happened in the COVID pandemic period, and it was very hard for me to conduct any maintenance work or any kind of contact with the tenants in general. And the tenants got a COVID, and then she put a sign on the front door, "Do not enter. We have a COVID here." So it was really hard to contact with them. And then later, the tenants kind of ran away from the property, but kind of subleased the property to other people, a group of people, which is illegal. And then I found that one of those people owns that trailer, so I was able to have him removed the trailer. But I do not know what exactly happened to the truck, the other truck that was still parked there. But as Ms. Mohamed mentioned, maybe I was trying to get the people out of the property, and then I started that even before I get this vehicle submergement order. So I was more like tackling the more big issues. So probably I misplaced the vehicle submergement order or somewhere. But anyway, later I learned that he got arrested by police, and then he was put into jail. So also I had to wait for him to come back and then remove the vehicle. But then probably it didn't happen. So
sir, I
Yep.
think you're over time, but if you could just please let us know what you're requesting, then we can deliberate your request.
I just have one
Okay,
last
okay.
remark.
Okay.
I didn't not neglect the problem, but probably I was overdoing it in the very beginning. So probably that's trying to convey. I trying to do my best, but the vehicle was not removed. Yeah.
Gotcha. All right, thank you. Anything else?
No.
All right, thank you so much, sir.
Thank you.
Ms. Jalali moves to close the public hearing. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion prevails. On this item is in Ward 1, and I would just suggest, I guess I would look to the, Ms. Marmon, do you have something to add? No. just to the property owner, the challenge that we face as council members is when the city incurs a cost because it did something like remove a vehicle, it does cost something. And if we don't assess it to you, that means everybody else in this room pays for the removal of your vehicle. And so we need to hold you responsible for the properties that you own and recognize the challenges that you faced in July of 2021. If it would be helpful, we can stretch out the payments by $100 for 5 years, if that would make a difference to you. But I believe we'll make a recommendation to approve the full amount. But just we could arrange a payment plan if that is something that would be would work.
I don't need a payment plan, but if you can, I mean, reduce a little bit of the penalty, then that would be more helpful than a payment plan.
Gotcha. Okay. I'm going to move the recommendation of the legislative hearing officer to assess the fee as charged. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion prevails.
5 in favor, no one opposed. The resolution is adopted. Item 33 is RLH VO 22-17, appeal of Sharon Kennedy and Michael Garcia tenants to a revocation of fire certificate of occupancy in order to vacate at 776 Bush Avenue.
Ms. Marmond.
Council President Brenman, council members, this inspection process started in November of 2021, and the orders were largely, if not completely, unaddressed through June of 2022, and it was for that reason that the Department of Safety and Inspection revoked the certificate of occupancy.
Ms. Mormond, apologies for interrupting you. You said that this problem came to our attention in March of 21 and continued through June of 22?
No, the process for inspecting this building began in November of 2021, and the items that were listed in the inspection reports were largely, if not completely, unaddressed through June 30th of 2022, at which point the department revoked the certificate of occupancy.
Okay, thank you. I just missed the beginning part.
Yep, there was some background noise.
Yep.
There is a dispute between the landlord and the tenant about where the problems for the non-compliance should be attributed. A fair bit of the hearing time was spent dealing with exactly that. This dispute also it became apparent that there were eviction proceedings going on in district court. I would say to you, as I said to them, that a dispute for the responsibility of who created the code violation, who should pay for it, and whether an eviction is associated with it, all of those matters are properly housed in district court. What is in front of the council are the fire certificate of occupancy orders that are the concrete items that are needed to bring the building into code compliance. And those are the items that had not been addressed. In the conduct of this legislative hearing, the tenor of the hearing disintegrated considerably to the point where I had to conclude the hearing and call in court security to clear the room because there was such a problem. It is for that reason that you do not have a complete record in front of you. Rather, you have a record in front of you that describes what I just have said, as well as me making a recommendation that the property be vacated July 21st, which is tomorrow, the day after this public hearing would be available for the council to review that recommendation. The vacate order that the department had in its order of June was June 30th. So July 21st represents 3 weeks longer than what the department had recommended in its original order. The appellant was looking for 30 days additional. I'm not sure from where that 30 days would have begun. Again, the hearing degenerated considerably, and this has not happened in my experience as a hearing officer.
All right, so, and I think this is important for people who appear to be here to testify. We're not talking about the eviction. We're not talking about what's going on in court. We're talking about the certificate of occupancy, and we're only allowed to discuss that because of what has been noticed. And I don't want to have a deteriorating conversation. We want to get to the end of this today. So we will have a public hearing. It looks like the tenants have appealed the revocation of the certificate of occupancy. Before we go to the public hearing, it's not often that we have a revocation of a certificate of occupancy, and it is typically because the place is not safe to live. It's not up to code compliance. And can you just hit the highlights for us about why the C of O has been revoked?
The Fire Certificate of Occupancy Program will order a property vacated for two reasons. One is it might condemn because a property is considered to be unsafe for human habitation. The other is for long-term non-compliance with the orders that it issues. In this particular case, it's long-term non-compliance with the orders, meaning that no individual order nor collectively did they rise to the level that the department felt that this was unsafe for human habitation, but rather there were no other enforcement tools available to make the property livable, and there was no path forward in the inspection process. They reported that there were no show inspections, so we'd have inspectors go out there. Things weren't being done along the way. There was simply no traction to be able to make forward progress. So it is really them reaching to the bottom of their tool bag to revoke in this kind of circumstance.
And I think I'm reading between the lines of what's happening here. So do you know where the court proceedings are currently on the other issues? Is that being heard currently?
I had conflicting reports in the legislative hearing, a yelling match, and I could not tell you exactly what the truth of the matter is, and I did not concern myself with creating a record about that, it being outside the purview of what the city's process is.
Okay. All right, got it. So we are looking at the certificate of occupancy revocation for continued noncompliance with the certificate of occupancy orders. All right. So this is a public hearing. We would like to first invite the tenants, the appellants, to come up, and they have 2 minutes to share perspective on this item.
Good afternoon.
Welcome.
I just want to apologize for my actions. On July 5th, I have a lot of emotions, and I don't get a chance to express it very often.
And I apologize for not mentioning this before you got up here. If you could just start out by introducing yourself.
I'm Sharon Kennedy. Michael Garcia, we're both in recovery, so I'm actually taking a chance being in here today, and he's in group. So that's why he doesn't show up, because he has to be there more than I do. So thank you for the opportunity. I want to apologize for my outbursts, like a lot of emotions, and just let me know that I'm ready for change in my life. So I understand, from my understanding, there was never a certificate of occupancy, so I don't understand how it can be revoked. I was coming from a homelessness shelter. I was displaced from my first home, and so I felt as if the landlord deceived me by advertising this property, and over the course of time, taking a lot of, like, over $13,000 of rent from, which is illegal to do for me and Michael Garcia. What made me aware of it was because of my asthma, and the way the person she hired was treating the property, it just wasn't right. He wasn't proper, and I study the codes a lot because I want to own my own property, and so I made a call. When I made the call to the city, I said, "Man, is this going to bite me?" They said, "No." I was crying. I was afraid to stand up for myself, but I needed to do so. I did, and then it's been biting me ever since. What I'm asking for the time is to move out. I don't want to live like that. The landlord has done a lot of things to me. The district court has done some things that's unfair. And I didn't know that you have to go here for this place to appeal this. So it's a lot of things I just learned. And I wouldn't have the time to go do it all. And plus being treatment, plus, find a place to live, being that I have a background that's not good, which is my own problem. But what I have done is taking steps to move. So what I've done so far, I said, the reason why the first, most of the time the landlords won't have properties until the first. So I can move in on the first. At the same time, the things that the landlord did, like cutting the water off with the other stuff she did with trash, I felt like that's her responsibility. I can take care of that differently, but it's my trash. I plan on getting it up myself, cleaning up the property, because I want to define myself, not by what somebody else wanted to define me as. So I feel responsible. I'll clean up my things. So that's why I wanted the time. It's just me doing it. So far, I've went and got a truck that I can use. I've got a couple of people to help me with the heavier things. There's even some things that she left on the property we're even willing to take. We've done it before. I just need the time to move, to get back property, to make their property right. I'll deal with the rest of it in a different court. And the fact that she didn't even really have grounds for eviction because, according to the laws that I read, she didn't have a right to even rent it or collect rent. So I'm just asking for her not to mess with me. I can get it done. You know, she comes and messes with me a lot, which kind of scares me. But I just want to get it done and get moved out. I don't want to be there. I'll deal with the rest of it later.
Ms. Kennedy, let me ask you a quick question.
Yes.
Are you, just to clarify, you're asking for an additional week from July 21st to August 1st?
Yep, I found a place.
Okay.
Yep.
I just was wanting to make sure, because sometimes we hear people's testimony, but it's not clear
Yeah,
what they're asking for. And you're saying till August 1st would help you?
Yeah, because my kids, they ain't helping me. You know, they got their own lives. My friends in my community, good luck. So I depend on myself. And for the most part, I have people, when I need to move the heavier stuff, they're there for me. The other thing is that because it was accumulated so much trash, because she stopped my trash, I have to recycle it, you know, in different places.
Yep.
And so I found out how to do it without cost, and it's going to take a little bit of time, but I got it. I got it figured out.
So 1 week.
Yes,
Okay.
That's all I need.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your testimony. All right, is there anyone else here to testify on this item? Come on up.
Good afternoon, dear council members. My name is Asamta Siri. I am the owner of 776 Bush Avenue, and Ms. Kennedy, she is my tenant, and she has absolutely wrecked the property from when she moved in. From day one, she has workers that were working with her to pay her rent when she was at the homeless shelter. They have abandoned her because she doesn't comply with anything. When I met her, she cried and was barely cleaning dust off my feet, that she's pleading with me to give her a space for her to change her life. She said she has COVID. She told me she miscarried. She told me her mom just died. She told me a lot of things, which took pity upon myself to provide her a place to stay. I have another property in Minneapolis that I showed her the place. I offered the place to her, and the homeless agency that was going to give her, that was going to provide her the accommodation, she did not meet the requirements. And she was desperate. And then I told her again, I said, okay, I have another property in St. Paul that I can provide to you, I can show it to you. Since you were already qualified in St. Paul, you can use the space to change your life, as you said. Unfortunately for me, I only noticed when she moved in that she was completely not what she told me. I have pictures, I have submitted pictures from day one she moved in. She has counselors, workers that they can testify. Some of the people, the workers that were working at the homeless shelter, they told me this is a big risk. I shouldn't let her move in.
So I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I feel like we're starting to kind of talk about the landlord-tenant relationship, and what we'd like to hear is there's a certificate of occupancy question in front of us, and we've just heard your tenant request 1 extra week. Is that something that you can live with, or is tomorrow the deadline for you?
I don't really think she should get any, because as I went by the property, I believe you, it is completely unsafe. It is completely uninhabitable. From the time that the Department of Safety personnel came in to do inspections, I had persistently pleaded with her to allow contractors to go into her apartment and do repairs. She has persistently refused. I have phone numbers of contractors, more than 10 contractors, that she has persistently refused to allow access. In the list, I put that I have to go in occasionally to assess the building, because I was told that she cannot take care of herself. She has never allowed me in her apartment.
But the question, so you're saying no, 1 more week is not acceptable to you?
Yes, please. Plus the fact that she sent me text messages today telling me that if I don't allow her, I will have to take inventory of her stuff. I will have to have a sheriff sign. I'll have to keep her property safe and all that. It is complete trash. You need to see fruit flies full everywhere.
Yeah.
It is trash. It
Yes,
is
but
horrible.
Nevertheless,
It is.
Yeah.
I mean, poop was backing up from the basement. She would not let a sewer person right there. I called the police, and she said,
we understand. And it also sounds like you have a concurrent case going on in court, so we're trying to get to the bottom of the certificate of occupancy, and it sounds like your preference is no. Ms. Jalali has a question for you.
So it says in our file, the purpose of the appeal is that you rented to the tenant without a certificate of occupancy. So I'm trying to understand the origins of this case. I recognize there's a lot of relationship dynamics happening, but the fact about the certificate is what I'm trying to get to. So either for you or for Ms. Mormon or both, what is the nature of the origins of this? Was the unit rented without a certificate of occupancy, and if so, why?
And that can be a question for Ms. Mormon.
Yeah.
Excuse me, sorry. A provisional, excuse me. A provisional certificate of occupancy was issued on October 22nd of 2021. So preceding the time period that this inspection cycle began.
So does that mean that I guess what I'm trying to understand in the timeline is at the time that the unit was advertised, was there a certificate of occupancy?
I'm not clear in the notes of when it was occupied by the tenant, but I can tell you that once the provisional certificate of occupancy was applied for in October, 1 month thereafter, the inspection cycle began.
Okay. Are there other questions for Ms. Mormon or others? Ms. Naker moves to close the public hearing. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? We closed. We're actually going to talk about the certificate of occupancy, so we close the public hearing. Thank you. Any comments from my colleagues? Ms. Naker.
Thanks, Council President. I want to acknowledge that there's a lot of underlying tension and frustration that I'm hearing from both sides, and I really appreciate both of your testimony and keeping it civil here today. And again, I know that this has been a frustrating situation for you both. I can tell that just from your testimony. It does seem to me reasonable to give to the first of the month for someone to be able to move into another place. I think the alternative, would be potentially someone with no place to go. And while I know how frustrating this period of time has been, it does seem like the end is in sight, and the damage has been done. And so allowing that additional time just for someone to find a stable place to stay seems like a reasonable request.
Other comments? I would concur with Ms. Naker with the understanding that the tenant is committing to move out at the first of the month, that it's 7 days, and that it does create that opportunity and potential. And I do believe that there's some truth behind the challenges with removing people who don't want to be removed from the property. And so if we have agreement on the 1st of August as a date, that we come to here at the council, that it seems like a better option than trying to force it tomorrow. So I would agree that the extension of 1 week to August 1st would be appropriate, albeit challenging, and recognizing the frustration and challenges that you have faced. Any other thoughts? Ms. Prince.
I believe it's more than a week.
Well,
August 1st is a Monday, I believe.
It's the 21st to the 1st.
Okay.
8 days. 10 days? 10 days?
Yeah, 10.
10 days.
11, actually.
11 days. 11 days. So moving from the 21st to the 1st of August. And I would even say probably the 31st is more appropriate, since that's the end of a rental period.
Council President Brenmoen, is the amendment to order the property vacated by the close of business on July 31st, so that on October 1st, an inspector could confirm that it's been vacated?
August 1st.
On August.
That would be then August 1st.
Thank you.
Yep. That would be the recommendation. Any other discussion on that motion? Thanks for the clarification, Ms. Prince. Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion prevails.
7 in favor, no one opposed, or 5 in favor, no one opposed. The resolution is adopted as amended for the unit to be vacated by the end of July 31st. Item 42 is RLH RR 22-25, third making finding on the appealed substantial abatement ordered for 864 Marion Street in Council File RLH RR 21-41.
Ms. Mormon.
Council President Brenmoen, this is not the first time I've been in front of you on this particular property. Indeed, the first time you saw this property as a proposed remove or repair action was December of 2019. In December of 2019, I asked you to refer the matter back into legislative hearing, and through a series of back and forth work, I was able to bring you a file by August 26th of 2020. So fully 8 months later, that was an actual proposal with financing to be able to rehab the property. At the 6-month mark, when we check the progress to see whether or not the nuisance condition has been abated, the nuisance condition had not been abated. The building inspector, in fact, made a determination that only 20% of the work had been done. We went through another series of conditions that would be required to get another 6-month grant of time. They were met. Again, at that mark, only 20% of the work had been done.
Sorry, Ms. Mormon, just to clarify, you said they were met or weren't met?
The conditions that I had asked the property owner to meet so that I could stand in front of you and say, please give this another 180 days, those had been met. The property itself remained unchanged in its level of rehabilitation. In November of 2020, when this came forward to you, those conditions were not met. And in fact, the council took a vote to go ahead with the removal of the property as the conditions had not been met. And they were met. The additional performance deposit was posted and some other things by Friday of that week after the council vote. And therefore, I came back to the council and said, please, will you recall this item and make a grant of 180 days. Since that time, we are still at 20% completion of the property. There are few finances available to be able to rehabilitate the property. It would seem that the original financing has fallen through, that there were obviously some problems with the financing structure that were unresolvable. There's been some proposals that a COVID catch-up rent payment around $20,000 could be used towards this. However, the cost of the rehab is significantly more than that, and it's at this point that I think it's might very well be spending good money after bad when there is no end game in sight with being able to finish this property. And indeed, there had not having been any progress for at least a year in doing this. Mr. Schilling is a nice man to work with, and I'm not feeling great about this recommendation. I don't feel like I have an option at this point. I don't feel like there's a path forward on this. My recommendation is to make a finding that the nuisance condition has not been abated and authorize the Department of Safety and Inspections to go ahead and abate the nuisance condition of this property within 15 days, after 15 days have expired.
Okay, and again, this is the fourth time this has been in front of this council.
Yeah.
All right. All right, thank you. Are there questions for Ms. Mormond? Sounds like none. This is a public hearing. Is there anyone here to speak to this item? Come on up. You can just introduce yourself and try to keep your remarks to 2 minutes.
Okay, thank you, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Robert Schilling, owner of the property. The time period that this has taken has passed so fast. On a routine cancer procedure, I went home bleeding to death. They nicked an artery in my kidney or something. The significant thing is, through this period, I've had 3 different occasions where this has happened. I've had to have blood transfusions. The nurse tells me that if you don't get your blood back up to the proper point, it affects your mental capacity and your physical organs start breaking down. So the significance was, that's probably why during a lot of this period, time just passed and didn't get much done. COVID has played a part in that I didn't get rent money, which she mentioned just now, that $20,000 in back payments, which finally came through a couple weeks ago. Between that and the $5,000 deposit has kept me really on the border of things. The original financing is the whole breakdown here. The financier was going to mail a check for $20,000, which is the day that we signed the paperwork, and he was going to get that much money out to me. Well, on a normal loan, you get the money. In this case, he's going to check with his partner and mail out $20,000. About 2 weeks later, there's a check for $10,000 payable to the general contractor, not to me. I haven't got another penny from him since. He's like disappeared. Plus, I've got this close to $80,000 mortgage on the building. If I default on that, he'll put a lien on another building. My whole life is going to crash if this thing doesn't go through one way or another. I have to get an extension or whatever. I've got a duplex with $100,000 equity that I can have on the market by the end of the month, 10 days from now. And between that and the $20,000 that I got from the back rent, I should be able to cover the financing.
Well, I'm going to make sure that you make the ask. What is it that you're asking us to do? To give you more, come back to, this is the 4th time, but to extend this again?
Yeah, well, yes, yes.
And what is an appropriate amount of time?
To complete the project? 90 days. If I got 90 days, it'll be done. And the financing, the plumbing contractor has already been paid just short of $5,000 that he's been paid. You know, there's not much left to pay him. There's payments made to the electrician, the general contractor.
Right.
He was going to pledge his own money through a financier of his, and because of this mortgage, that was stopped.
Well, sir, I understand that you've also had an opportunity to go through all these details with Ms. Mormon. That's why we kind of look for your summary and what you're asking for, because you had a legislative hearing with Ms. Mormon. So what I heard you just say was that you would like us to extend again for 90 days, and this is a rental property that you own. You don't live in this house, correct?
Correct.
Correct. Okay.
Yes.
So you've gone over your time. So if that's a correct summary of what you're asking for, then we need to close the public hearing. Is there anything else that I'm missing?
I'm sorry.
Is there anything else that I'm missing? You're asking for you'd like us to extend again for 90 days on a rental property that you are not living in. Correct?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Thank you for your testimony.
Yes. Okay. Yeah, because there's going to be litigation one way or another, I guess, the financier. So because it just, at this point, it's theft by swindle as far as I can see.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much for your testimony. If we have questions, we'll call you back up. Okay? All right, Mr. Tolbert moves to close the public hearing. Any discussion on that motion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion prevails. On this item, I just want to be clear, Ms. Mormon, we're not talking about a raise and remove, we're talking about a summary abatement, a major summary abatement. Or is a raise and remove?
Indeed, this is a substantial nuisance abatement order. This is about removing the property because it has not been rehabilitated according to the orders that have been issued by the City Council over the past 2.5 years.
Okay, just, I was not noticing, or it wasn't in the title. And I did have an opportunity to talk to Councilmember Tao. He is in support of the recommendation of the Legislative Hearing Officer. He's not here today, but I wanted to share with my colleagues that he did reach out with that, with his opinion on this item. Is there any discussion? All right, seeing none, Mr. Lally moves the recommendation of the Legislative Hearing Officer. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion prevails.
5 in favor, no one opposed. The resolution is adopted. Item 43 is RLH FCO 22-56, appeal of Sandra Liu to a correction notice, complaint inspection at 38 Maryland Avenue East.
Ms. Mormon.
Council President Brenmoen, this is an appeal of a fire correction order for this property. The owner was looking for an extension of time. I am recommending an extension. I believe the owner would also like an alternative means of compliance. The bulk of the orders have to do with providing pest control to the interior and exterior of the property. Some kitchen cabinet repair and light fixture repair also mentioned. The owner would prefer to do the pest control on her own. It is my strong recommendation that the requirement is that this be professionally done. This was a complaint on June 8th about the pest issues, and by the time they're noticeable on the interior and exterior by the inspector, I think it's time to call the professionals in. In those situations, what the fire inspectors do is they review the receipts and the recommendations of the pest control agency, which in all likelihood involves revisits to the property within a few weeks to make sure that issues have been addressed. So my recommendation again is to grant an extension, and that extension would be to August 1st to come into compliance with these orders. This is a fire correction order. This is not a revocation. Non-compliance with this would result in an eventual additional enforcement action, but it is not that serious of an order that you're looking at.
Great. And you said that this infestation of rodents, it was treated by tenants in February and then was ordered by...
I believe the landlord herself did, and she's also having, again, a similar issue. We have tenant-landlord difficulties and getting access to the property. Too many people being in the property is being reported, other kinds of things. What it comes to is we have a very specific issue about pest control and some minor repairs that need to be dealt with. That is a straight-up habitability issue.
Okay, so similar to other conversations we've had tonight, we're not talking about a landlord-tenant dispute. We don't get in the middle of landlord-tenant disputes. We're talking about a correction order centering particularly around a mice infestation, and the recommendation from the Legislative Hearing Officer is to grant an extension to August 1st, which is 12 days. And the appellant may ask to do it herself as opposed to hiring a professional. All right, thank you. This is a public hearing. Is there anyone here to speak to this item? Welcome.
Good afternoon. My name is Sheila Meisner, and she's my sister, Sandra Liu. She's the owner. So I'm here to interpret for her. So what had happened was, like, we have these 4 things that we have to do to pass inspection. Apparently, I called Oregon to have them come and sprayed for mice control, but apparently there's some more issue with it. There's some structure issue, and there's some holes that needs to be done. So they can't literally fix that until, that all the structure is done. So that's one issue with the rodent, and then they have food all over the house and everything else, so that's part of it too. And then the second issue that we have is the cabinet repair. So I went in there, so we had 2 contractors in there to do the fixing and stuff, and apparently they trashed the kitchen. So all the cabinets, it's all deteriorated, and it needs a new complete cabinet. The whole house needs to be gutted. And then the third issue is the electrical fixture, and apparently there's some water damage, so it's not an easy fix. So we really have to hire someone to look at the roof to see if there's any leakage or anything like that, to be able to fix the light before we can do the fixture. So it needs time. And then the other thing too is that we have problem with the contractor coming in while the tenant's still there. So they're supposed to be gone by August 31st. So we're requesting that all the work be done after they leave. And
when is the end of their tenancy?
According to the document, they were supposed to leave August 31st. That is their eviction date.
Okay, when you say that is their eviction date, do you mean
Yeah.
that's the day their lease ends, or do you have a court order?
Well, it was agreed between the lawyers, so yeah.
Okay.
So she filed an eviction on the tenant, and then the lawyer talked to each other, and then they agreed that on the 31st that she will leave.
Okay.
But I don't know if they're going to leave or not, because none of my contractor don't want to go in there because it's very dirty in there.
Yeah, understood. Just trying to understand timeline. So the recommendation here is to give you an extension to August 1st. You're saying you can't really get in there until August 31st if the eviction is successful.
Right, and then what she wants to do is to sell it off. She doesn't want to fix because the damage, there's so much damage to it. It costs more money for her to fix the house. So she wanted to sell it to those ugly home, whatever, where they just
After
buy
that,
it,
yeah,
and then
after
after
they
they move out.
Okay, is there anything else we should know?
This is all the list that I have. Well, the only part that we don't know if the tenant's going to leave or not, because then if they don't leave, then we have to hire the police to kick them out. So that's the only problem that we have. So we don't know, because they've been living there. They were supposed to move out
before March 1st.
Yeah, and then they refused us to move out and not even pay rent.
So then you got the eviction
Yes.
agreement. Okay. Ms. Stinker has a question.
Thanks, Council President. I'm sorry if I'm misunderstanding something, but were you saying that you don't plan to make these corrections to the property anyway because you plan to sell?
Yeah, because there's just too much damage to the house. The tenant lived there. They really trashed the house. They did a lot of damage to the house.
So just to clarify, what is the purpose of having an extension till any point if you don't plan to make the corrections?
Well, there's an inspection supposed to be done on August 2nd, and we won't be able to finish that, and then they won't move out until August 31st. So I'm not quite sure how the process works, so that's why we're here to ask to see what is our next step is. Do we just lift this up? Because I don't know whoever did the inspection didn't realize that, the cabinet is all broken, and it's all, it's like deteriorated. You can't even put a cabinet door back on. And then the electricity, you can't just put a light bulb in there because there's water, there's leakage on there.
Please don't do that. Okay, so let me just ask Ms. Marmon a quick question. If there's no noncompliance with the certificate of occupancy, the certificate of occupancy will be revoked.
That is correct. And when the certificate of occupancy is revoked, an actual date to vacate the premise would be issued. If the premise is not in code compliant by the vacate date, it will be referred to the registered vacant building program.
Category 1. Okay.
Depending on its assessment for the level of code violations,
All right.
that would be yet to be determined.
And some of that's unknown because we haven't been able to get access. Okay. Ms. Naker.
Thanks, Council President. So this level of correction, which you mentioned wasn't such a serious level of correction, would be enough to result in a revocation of the certificate of occupancy?
This inspection was a result of a complaint. The inspector went out and investigated the complaint and saw a couple of other items while he was there. This is not a top to bottom inspection of the building. That would be a different kind of, this is, you pick up the phone, you call, you say you got a problem. They're not going to give you a top to bottom. They're going in, like the oven's broken, the heat is off. They go check just that exact thing. And that's what happened in this case, is just that was checked. And orders were written on that. A more complete inspection would be forthcoming. And I feel like I'm not answering your question.
Well, just so I understand, maybe it's moot, but just if nothing happens on August 2nd and an inspector goes in, does that lead to a revocation of the C of O? Or what happens then? I'm trying to understand.
Because it's in front of City Council, the answer would be in all likelihood yes, because the department would need to enforce the council's decision, which would mean that they would want to increase the level of enforcement. They wouldn't issue another same order that the council had already made a determination on. They would increase the level of enforcement.
Thank you. Are there other questions of Ms. Mormon or the appellants? Thank you. I'm going to move to close the public hearing. Is there something else you wanted to add? No, you're good? Okay. I'm going to move to close the public hearing. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion prevails. Tonight feels like the good old days. Oof. These are tough, really tough issues. What I'm trying to understand, I really do feel like we're in a real tangled challenge. And part of me is wondering if it would be helpful for everyone if we went ahead with the C of O as scheduled. And that would be my recommendation, or I would go with the recommendation of the legislative hearing officer, but I certainly feel like it's been a lot coming at us tonight, so I would certainly welcome input on that item.
Thanks, Council President. It has been complicated. I guess my only concern about that would be that if the revocation of C of O happens on August 2nd and there's been an agreement for the tenant to vacate between attorneys, which is not our concern, by August 31st, if that vacation would have to happen prior to August 31st, if that could further complicate things, since what the appellants are asking for is to have an extension until August 31st, I wonder if granting what they've requested is the simplest.
Right, but as you mentioned, it's not to do the repairs, but just to, but that is consistent with earlier decision by this body to align those time periods. So if you're suggesting that we take the recommendation of the legislative hearing officer to the end of August?
At the request.
At the request of the appellant. Are there other thoughts on this item? Anyone?
Council President, is that an amendment to extend to August 31st, or?
I think it was just a thought at this point.
The council could go with the August 1st deadline and ask that the Department of Safety and Inspections conduct a complete fire C of O inspection at that time, which would inform whether or not a revocation would be appropriate in the year. Just get a gauge on exactly what we're talking about for building conditions. And I will say that the traditional length of time for revocations for non-compliance of this nature is 4 weeks. So that would not displace somebody prior to the end of August.
All right, so serendipity is in play.
Yep.
I would move the recommendation of the legislative hearing officer. Is there more discussion? All right. Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion prevails.
5 in favor, no one opposed. The resolution is adopted. Item 45 is RLH RSA 22-1, appeal of Matthew and Jim Lindquist to a rent stabilization determination at 1029 Raymond Avenue.
Ms. Mormond.
Council President, council members, you have a very large file in front of you, and I'm going to touch it lightly, knowing that you've had a chance to look it over. I've gotten some questions and so on. What is in front of you is an appeal of an apartment building owner, Iron Range LLC, Mr. Matthew and Jim Lindquist. They are looking for an exception to the 3% cap on rent increases provided for in the legislative code. They have asked for an increase of 15%. They acquired the property back in April of this year, and on May 18th, they went to the Department of Safety and Inspections and made application to get an exception to the rent cap. 10 days later, they received communication from Director Weesey saying that there were some things missing from the application and she would like to talk to them about it. They had a discussion, I believe via Teams, on the next business day, the 31st. At that point, the missing items from the application were explained, and it was indicated by Ms. Weesey that we need these items to evaluate, or you can go ahead and appeal, but the determination from the department will be to deny your request for an exception. That letter denying the request for the exception to the rule went out also on May 31st and was appealed to our office on June 6th. Legislative hearings were conducted on June 21st and on June 28th. We received a fair bit of additional information in the legislative hearing process and in the appeal application itself. You have a letter in your packet in front of you from me dated July 12th with my findings and recommendations. There was a follow-up question or statement rather, I guess I would say email, also dated July 12th from the property owner, and a response from me to a particular question, and that is in writing in the record as well. I would say normally once findings and recommendations are put in front of council, that is the end of communication and the rest is in front of you, but this is an unusual circumstance. The legislative code provides that an exception to the cap on the rent increase should be granted if one of 7 different conditions that are enumerated in the ordinance are met. In reviewing each of these criteria, I believe that certainly one of those conditions has been solidly met. And I have left open my conclusions on a second one of those conditions because, and that the first one that's met is a pattern of rent, I believe it's called increases or decreases. And I think the pattern of the rent in the past and through the time of acquisition represents a de facto decrease. It has not changed. It is below market. It is an average of $985 per 2-bedroom unit in the building. Another area that expenses are being incurred and would possibly be an argument for an exception to the 3% cap is capital expenditures. I don't think that was fleshed out enough for me to say cleanly, yes, that is also a reason to accept. But there is already the other one on the record, and I would say I am recommending to you, because of that you grant the appeal asking for an exception to the 3% cap and grant 15% rent increase. I would note that I do that with a proviso. The documents in front of me included a table that showed there was the intention of the property owners to remove from what is currently charged as rent to be separately charged natural gas, water, and sewer. So those three things were being pulled out. And so just picture that being pulled out of the 985, but there's still being an increase on top of the 985 of 15%. So by my math, when I average this out, I come to a 21% increase in rent. It is not, I believe, the intention of the ordinance or the rules to enforce the ordinance to allow for that great of an increase at one time. And therefore, I'm recommending, yes, 15%, but not in the fashion that it's described in the attached materials. That is the question that was the follow-up question from the appellant, having to do with the utilities and how those should be considered. As I said, there is a memo from me in your file on this topic. Two other items were also brought up in the appeals process that the appellant wanted to have considered by the City Council. The first one is that a second 15% increase, or I should say a range increase, I think it was ranging between like 2% and 15%, be granted for the next lease cycle in order that all of the rents be able to be brought up to $1,300 for each of the two-bedroom units. I think, and what I stated in the memo is I think it's premature to come to a determination on that question because first, this is the first appeal that the council is hearing. We are testing the machinery for going through these questions right now. This is also in the future and it can be referred back for additional consideration. So I think that we are safe in saying that discussion can be delayed somewhat. In my memo, I indicated that recommendation should be forthcoming back to you by March 1st. Lastly, there was a request that came up in the appeals process for a rent increase for Unit 4, which is recently completely rehabilitated, from its rent of $985 to go all the way to the $1,300. That's the goal after a couple of lease cycles for all of the units in the building. My recommendation is to allow for the 15% rent increase for this unit and not go with the full 30% increase for this unit. I think that that is consistent with what the Department of Safety and Inspection rules are, and in last week's conversation that you had hearing from the stakeholder group, there were some policy reasons that supported that DSI rule as well. I'm happy to answer any questions at this time or after the appellant has questions, statements.
Look to see if there's questions. Thank you for pioneering through this. It seems like it's been a very efficient, thoughtful process, and I appreciate your work on this, Ms. Mormon. Ms. Jalali.
Thank you, Ms. Mormon. I have a couple of questions just to make sure that I'm understanding the recommendation correctly. So one of the questions that I have is about your recommendation to make clear utilities are meant to be not separated from that rent increase, that you can't just pile costs onto folks in the name of utilities, and making that clear. And my question is, that conforms to the definitions that we have, that we pass in this council ahead of the May 1st effective date. What is the enforcement mechanism by which, if that continues to happen, the city can follow up because of documented concerns of that happening? If we grant this exception with that condition, how do we monitor that condition? That would be my question around the utilities issue.
If I understand your question correctly, is if there is an increase beyond what's approved by the city council, how would the city enforce its decision to not grant an exception beyond the 15%?
So, yeah, I believe that we're saying the same thing, but basically, if we are disputing the issue of utilities and saying you can have an exception, but it can't, factor those into the increase you're trying to do in the way that you've been doing it, how do we make sure that that is adhered to if everything in the recommendation is applied and then it happens in the real world? What is the post exception process monitoring, and is it what remedies do tenants have in the building for that? That would be my question.
Council President Brenmo and Council Member Jalali, that is a very good question. The answer to it is not spelled out in the ordinance that was adopted by ballot initiative or in the DSI rules. I believe that right now the best procedures for doing this within what the legislative code allows are being considered. Again, this is your first case that's under appeal, and enforcement hasn't been pursued in any case to the best of my knowledge. So I would say forthcoming.
Thank you. It's my understanding under the current rules that we have that tenants can reach out at any time to our council office. So I guess I would say that, if we go with this recommendation, my commitment is to tenants in the building to be available and a resource if the issues with the utilities continue to happen. So I just think that's important to state for the record. And then my other question is about one of your recommendations is to allow for an increase up to 15%. And it's my understanding that we are following the criteria and direction laid out in the ordinance to get a fair return on investment. And so my question is that 15% calculated to basically, does it match to the fair return formula, or does it come from somewhere else? Where does the 15% come from? And what is it based on in the recommendation?
The 15% figure is a figure that's promulgated in the DSI rules for implementing the ordinance. The ordinance itself is silent on percentages, and the rules are what we rely on in that case, so that's where that comes from. In terms of meeting the criteria on return on investment, in my analysis of the financial information, I think that my recommendation will still not bring them what would generally be considered the return on investment that they would like to see, and that many buildings do see, which is why they want to see the second rent increase. In the past, the building has had a stronger rate of return than what is anticipated by the current ownership, largely due to a mortgage on the property. That mortgage is not something that the DSI rules or the ordinance allow to be taken into account for making a determination about return on investment.
So it sounds like you're saying it's based on a formula within the DSI rules and then your comprehensive assessment of all the financial information that we have to date.
The 15% is within the rules. My recommendation on the particulars are based on my assessment of the financials in front of me, yes.
Great. Thank you. That's very helpful. Okay, I don't have other questions. I welcome other questions if people have them.
Are there questions from my colleagues? Now, Ms. Jalali and I were speaking earlier about this matter, recognizing that it's really citywide in nature, but thanking you also for being the first council member and digging in on this item as well. Are there questions from colleagues? All right, there are no questions. All right, this is a public hearing. Is there anyone here to speak to this item? Thanks for sticking it out with us.
I just hope I don't get a ticket. You guys validate parking out in front?
No, we encourage people to ride their bikes. I will just remind you, as we've mentioned to other people, that we know that you've had a significant amount of time to speak with Ms. Moorman in the legislative hearing format, so you have a limited amount of time here in front of the council to hit the high notes.
I just wanted to clarify a couple of things. This Unit 4 that we've just...
Can you start by introducing yourself, please?
Oh, my name is Jim Lindquist. It's my son and I that own the property.
Okay.
And I wanted to thank the committee and stuff. They've been very helpful and very nice to deal with and such. And thank you for letting me come in front of you, Council President and council members. The one unit that we've renovated is basically a one-bedroom unit, so it won't get up to that $1,300 range. The 15% that we were requesting gets us from the $900 range to the $1,100 range, and the 15% next year that we were hoping for, or whatever the rates kind of fare out to be, gets us from the 1,100 to the 1,300. And that's what we were kind of shooting for. Excuse me. The other thing that we were dealing with the utilities, it wasn't that we were trying to jack up the rents 15% and then charge them a chunk for utilities. We were trying to raise the rents by 3% and have them pay for utilities that would get us back up to that upper 10, 11 range, but the 15% does that also. So that's kind of what we were looking for. We still understand that we're not at market value, but it's a lot to put on a tenant to take it from $975, $80 to tell them that it's now $1,300, and we just couldn't see that being fair or right or just. So we were trying to see if we couldn't get, you know, if we were allowed the 15% this time, you know, is there an option where you would understand that we were trying to get 15% because we're still so far below market value and stuff. So that's where we're.
Okay.
So
are you, the legislative hearing officer has made a recommendation. Are you here because you oppose her recommendation?
no, we're just more or less verifying to see what it is. I had other business in town today, and it's like, okay, we can stop in here, we can see whether we were granted the 15% or not, or.
We'll just pop in for 2 hours. Gotcha. Okay, so generally the recommendation, you're not here to contest the recommendation.
No,
you're
no,
hearing
no.
what's
If
been-
we can get the 15%, that would be great. Then that gets us part way to where we should be in the neighborhood and such. And my son Matt put together all of the numbers and such. So, I mean, we're not trying to gouge anybody and stuff
Okay.
like that. So.
Well, I appreciate your testimony, and I will just say kind of more broadly that I sometimes think it's helpful to hear percents and also to hear numbers. You know, like just to kind of put things in perspective. So I appreciated your putting that lens on it as well for us today. Does anyone have questions? All right, thank you. Thank you for being here.
Thank you very much.
All right, Ms. Jalali moves to close the public hearing. All in favor, say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? Motion approved.
Yeah. It's been a long one. Okay, thank you. I was waiting for you to yield to me.
I was going like this.
I was like,
Okay, go
yeah.
for it.
Thank you. So I want to thank Ms. Mormon for your very exhaustive review of the many facts with this request. We are directed under the ordinance to consider a clearly outlined number of factors, and if one of them can be demonstrated, then that is the basis on which the city has to grant the request. This is my understanding of what we are being asked to do and how I'm viewing this decision. I have reviewed these facts and findings in the file as well, and I would agree that the one criteria that actually meets the standard we're being asked to meet is the finding around the pattern of recent rent increases or decreases. That is an analysis based on what our PED housing staff provided and our own, publicly available government data from the Met Council. So this, to me, feels like the clearest explanation of what this is based on. I want to affirm that I think it's extremely important as we test and kind of see how the local community is experiencing the rent stabilization policy, that we are governed by the rules that we have in place right now and the definitions we have in place right now as the ordinance was passed by the voters. That's why I think it's important that we are paying close attention to the issue of utilities in individual cases like this, other fees that we know tenants are experiencing, and additionally that it's really clear what is being granted and based on what. So my findings are that we, as a city, should grant we should move the recommendation of the legislative hearing officer, but I personally care very deeply about additionally setting a standard and tone with property owners seeking exception requests, that it's clear, it's based on our very comprehensible criteria and publicly published worksheets that they can access. Staff have invested many, many hours of time in making sure that people's questions can be answered. And ultimately, our combined responsibility is to tenants in the building who deserve to have the rules applied to them or have a clear and legal basis why there's an exception being granted. So I want to reaffirm that those are the high-level principles that I think are important in this situation. I'll be moving the recommendation, but I also would welcome any other thoughts or questions from colleagues if they have them.
Thank you, Ms. Jalali. And I think especially after this tonight, I would say I also appreciate landlords who invest in properties and provide housing for people and work in sometimes challenging situations. And so I think it is worth recognizing that we're also here for that. Other thoughts on this item? All right, so there's a motion to approve the recommendation of the legislative hearing officer. Just no more discussion. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion prevails.
5 in favor, no one opposed. The resolution is adopted.
All right, so that brings us to the end of our legislative hearing consent agenda. We are looking at the balance of items 31 through 58, things we have not heard separately. If this is you, this is your public hearing. Looks like there's no one here. Ms. Prince moves to close the public hearings and approve. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion prevails.
5 in favor, no one opposed. The public hearings are closed and the consent agenda is adopted as amended.
I will just offer, if anyone has news from the wards, things that we must know before we adjourn, that now is your public hearing. Ms. Prince?
I just have one thing, and actually it is finishing up in 15 minutes, so we can't attend it. But along the lines of landlords contributing to the betterment of our community, Tees & Talley owns 3 large developments in my ward, and they are hosting a choir from South Africa through a group called the International Exchange, music ministry based in South Africa and in partnership with the United States to facilitate hope and reconciliation through musical performance. It took place today from 4 to 6 at Highwood Hills Rec Center. Just a lovely event, and I just wanted to acknowledge the fact that this manager has taken on this role to do something culturally really wonderful for that community. So,
I think I saw a video of that, and it's pretty cool. It's a shame that we missed it, but there's still time to get to Groovin' in the Garden if people want to do something still tonight. That's in front of the Como Conservatory, a beautiful backdrop, family-friendly, dog-friendly, leave your cats at home type of dance in the grass type of event. So it starts at 6:30. Anything else before us today? All right, seeing none, we're adjourned.